Hi, I'm Spencer Brown, and this is my Module 13 for EDL 850 around tort law. So, tort law, as defined in our textbook, is an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another that is independent of contract. So, this is a very widespread law, has a very wide range of categories that fall underneath it. Two first kind of outline pieces are intentional or unintentional. So if you think of like battery and assault, clearly those are intentional issues, whereas some unintentional could deal with issues of maybe trespassing um, without knowing it, or negligence, or recklessness. We're going to review a few cases in this assignment. The first one is Flanagan versus Canton. This is a case where I believe it was fifth grade students were acting really rowdy in gym class, and so the gym teacher kind of closed it up early and first lectured the kids on making sure they do the right things, and then discussed with one particular student some things that he could have done differently while he sent the rest to the locker room. In the locker room, things got rowdy again. A kid got pushed and got injured, and so that student and his parents filed a claim that the teacher was negligent in his supervision of the class. So, in the end, I don't believe they were successful with the lawsuit. But I think there's some reactive measures obviously would take place. One, there would be student consequences for their actions. But then I would really talk about some formalized routines for heightened situations. One of the issues that came up in the article was that because the kids were rowdy, the staff member realized that this may have been a foreseeable liability. Certainly what was argued in the case, whether or not it won, certainly could argue that. And so I think that as a administrator, it would be important that I communicate to staff that when anything seems to be a little heightened in terms of possible harm, that we tighten up our awareness and think about how we can supervise maybe in potential situations that we wouldn't otherwise. Next one is Frame, and I'm versus Camo. This was an 8th grade student who was being disruptive during a spelling test with a substitute, and the substitute asked, it was actually two students, asked one to leave, and he did, and the second one was not complying. So the substitute walked over, and the student stood up. The substitute grabbed the student by the arm to try to forcefully remove him, and he pulled his arm away, fell back, and hit a wall. And then he, in turn, filed for assault and battery. While he was not successful in this, and the courts ruled that the student was impeding on the learning and that it was not excessive force, it does speak to the importance of having clear and consistent discipline processes, whether that be a flow chart and a really clear picture for all staff, regardless of a substitute or not, to look at and say, okay, here's how I respond in a major infraction, which is so the piece that comes with having really clear expectations on how majors and minors are handled is ensuring that your staff is professional adherence to that discipline process. Oftentimes, schools may have it on paper, but unless it's actually being operationalized, you're certainly in just as much of a liability situation. Next one I'm going to talk about is I believe it was a high school situation where students were in PE class and I think they finished early or something, but they had some kind of free time and they asked to use the springboard to try to touch the basketball rim. And according to the case, they said that the PE teacher had allowed this to happen for 20 years. No kid had ever gotten injured. Sure enough, a student got injured this time, and they went to sue. for negligence by letting the students behave that way on equipment they may not have been trained on. So I think the reactive measure obviously would be to remove the springboard and other equipment that's not being used that could potentially cause harm. I would make clear-cut policies to begin with about what's appropriate and not in terms of use of potentially dangerous equipment. And if you're utilizing something like a springboard, you would certainly want students who are familiar with it and have been trained on it in a gymnastics class or something where they might be using it. And then obviously there should be some professional discretion here about what we allow students to use and when to ensure that we just don't put our district in a liable situation like this. This next one was a football team where the coach asked the team to run back to the locker room. It happened to be dark and they had to run through a creek or some kind of overflow of water. One of the players stumbled and felt like he hurt his back, so they went after the school for negligence on the coach's behalf. This one was a little more difficult in pinpointing what reactive measures I would take. Certainly I would have a discussion with the coach about thinking through what natural environments may mean for any typical requests he would make, like running back to the locker room, which he probably did after every practice. Having preseason coaches meetings in general on ensuring safety of students, student athletes, and thinking through the liabilities that could come on any moment, especially when you're talking about something like weather and any kind of natural conditions that may be outside, and just having professional discretion with whatever conditions is dealt. The last one I'm going to review was certainly a more tragic one. A soccer goal fell on a student and fatally injured that student during a PE class. Certainly, after that, you would want to make sure all your equipment is appropriately installed for safety. A soccer goal falling like that would mean that it probably was not anchored the way that it should have been. There should be a very clear policy on how we routinely maintain and inspect all equipment, especially ones where we have heightened potential injuries, like in PE class. And then as a administrator, I would certainly look for PE teachers that would have the professional discretion to maintain and install things appropriately, and always look for anywhere a student could potentially be getting injured and get that fixed right away. These are the resources that I used, and thanks for listening.